Good morning, everybody. Are you ready, Madam Administrator?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Thank you. So we have up first, we have the Commission, the Department of Aging and Disability Services. Hi, guys. How are you? Commissioner? You just want to give us a brief overview and then I'm sure we'll have some questions for you. I know Representative Walker and I have questions, so. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, Senator Lesser. My name's Amy Porter. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Aging and Disability Services, and I am joined today by Jasmine Berry, who's our new Fiscal Administrative Manager, and Andrew Norton, who's our Legislative Liaison. So our budget this year is maintains our ability to continue to provide our current services, and with the addition of one community ombudsman position, and we are happy to answer any questions you have for us today.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask a basic question first. Do you have money that comes to you out of the insurance fund and out of the workers' compensation fund? Can you explain what those are and what that is related to?
Sure. So for the insurance fund, we have a fall prevention program in our state unit on aging. And the workers' compensation fund funds a workers' rehabilitation program for individuals who have been injured on the job. So they work directly with the Workers' Comp Commission, but the workers' rehabilitation counselors sit within our agency and provide services to those individuals who are interested in return to work services.
So who are those, on the fall prevention, who are those people that we're helping out? The people that are state employees that work with people that work for different nonprofits that help people, seniors themselves? Who is it for?
The fall prevention program is for older adults.
Older adults who are working
In
or
Connecticut.
older adults who are staying home and they fell, and this is something to provide railings for them or provide some sort of staff support. What is that for?
We can get some additional information on that and some specific numbers of the individuals that we serve if you'd like, and provide that for the subcommittee meeting.
So because it said in 22 actually was 39,500. Was that relative to the pandemic? Or what was that relative to be? That's only 10% of the funding that was provided in this year that we're in, and in the next 2 years after this.
Probably I can double check on that. I know that we had a lot of our services impacted pretty significantly by the pandemic, and we did have some carry forward that shows in the budget. That wasn't one of the particular line items that did have carry forward, but we can check on the specifics of that particular amount.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. And then the workers' compensation fund, same sort of question. It's $1.4 million in actual expenditures in fiscal 22, but the current year it's 2.1, and then going forward it goes up slightly. So who benefits from that? Is that workers that work with seniors, or is it seniors themselves, or what is it for?
So the workers' rehabilitation program works with individuals who are working, who get injured on the job and are getting workers' compensation. They are then offered the opportunity to get rehabilitation services to help them return to work, either in the same job or a different job with some accommodations. So it is targeted toward those individuals who were injured on the job, and they specifically are counselors who are paid for out of this fund. Their salary, their fringe come out of this fund, and there's also additional money for training, for on-the-job training, for education if somebody needs to be retrained, all comes out of that fund.
And how old is the person that you're doing the counseling for? Is it someone that's 55 or someone that's 65 or someone that's 75?
It actually could be anybody. It's working age. So that is not for our older adults,
Okay.
particularly, although it could be an older adult that gets injured, but it's for a working age individual.
It's for, so it could be someone 25.
Correct.
So and you handle that because of the disability part of your budget?
Correct.
Okay,
So we're an aging and disability agency. So we do have that cross. That one's more on the disability side. It's one of our employment focused programs.
okay. So we were just all in a meeting right now and somebody's apparently calling us.
It said Democratic Senate on that.
I don't think they're trying to call us.
Kathy call.
No, it's not a Kathy call. We were just in a meeting right now. How many people does your agency employ right now? How many people do you have working for you?
Currently we have 336 filled positions.
336. And how many empty positions do you have?
We have 114 vacant positions.
Okay, so I'm looking at the Department of Aging and Disability Services, and it says 130 positions and 6 workers' compensation positions. So help.
Yep. Thank you for the question, because it is confusing. And actually, when people see the budget book, they think our agency is just the 131 plus the 6, but we're about 75% federally funded, both for our staffing and for our services. So we have federally funded positions as well. So the 131 are the general fund positions plus the 6 recommended workers rehabilitation counselors that are out of the workers' compensation fund. And then we have a number of people that are federally funded positions as well. That's the majority of our positions.
And those federally funded position, are they on the aging side or the disability side of your budget?
The majority of them are on the disability side. We have over 100 individuals who work in our disability determination services program. They're the folks who make the determinations when somebody applies for Social Security, disability insurance, or supplemental security income. We have state employees who work for our agency under our disability determination services that provide those services. We also have a vocational rehabilitation program where folks are federally funded. And we have a number of other positions. We have our Board of Education Services for the Blind that has a mix of state funded positions and federal positions. So mostly on the disability side.
And relative to that, do you have job coaches also that you pay for?
We contract for job coaching services. If we need job coaching for somebody that we work with, we have an employment plan, somebody goes to work, we can include short-term job coaching as part of our services. We don't do long-term services in the vocational rehabilitation program, but if somebody's going to need long-term job coaching or employment supports, we'll work with the Department of Developmental Services or the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We'll look for natural supports with the employer, try to find other ways to build that in as we're doing the initial plan to place somebody.
Thank you. Representative Walker?
Thank you, Madam. So I'm going to go right back to where Senator Austin was questioning. So you have 330 and we have an accounting in our budget sheets of 130. So we have about 200 people that we don't have listed in our budget. Is there a way that you could get us that information on and what your federal dollars are to pay for these other 200 people so that we can get a better snapshot of what your agency does and who serves in it?
Certainly. We have a breakout of our personnel by the, what kind of funding source they come from, the state funding, workers rehab, and then our federal funding. And we have one group of other funding. So we'll bring all of that to the subcommittee meeting. We also put together every year for this purpose, a budget at a glance that breaks out for each program, what's the state funding and what's the federal funding. It makes it a little bit easier to look at it by funding source.
It's just so that we can have a better accounting. I mean, when you tell us you have 330 and we only have an accounting of 130, that makes it a little imbalanced.
Right.
So we need to know exactly where the dollars are.
Yeah,
and
we're
how-
happy to do that. The
Thank
budget book only reflects the general
General
fund
fund,
and the
correct.
workers' compensation fund positions that we have. None of our federal funding would be in here.
Okay. I'm going to ask the regional long-term care ombudsman. Can you explain to me what does that person do or will do if funded?
So the proposed position is for a community ombudsman position. So as you know, we have a long-term care ombudsman program where we have the state ombudsman and regional ombudsman throughout the state. They work with folks that are in nursing facilities, assisted living, and residential care homes. But as you know, there's a rebalancing in the state and looking at more people being served at home. And there is not an ombudsman program, a big program for the community side. So in last year's budget, the legislature did include a community ombudsman manager position to start to build the program. This second position would then be the ombudsman person to start. And because it's just one person beside the manager, the idea would be for them to start to track calls, to see what the trends are, to see what the needs are, so that if we do get federal funding for the community ombudsman, which has been discussed, we'll have a better sense of what the needs are out there. We'll try to build it around the types of calls that we get, make sure that we understand who does what out in the community, and really make sure we can be clear about those roles. So that's the intent for this community ombudsman.
I think it's a good addition. I don't know if it's enough of an addition, because we have been going towards trying to move people out of nursing homes into their own homes and trying to support them, but we don't seem to have enough people to support them. And it becomes a real catastrophe for the people that are trying to make those transitions. I had several constituents in my district who are either they're in struggle with owning their homes and trying to keep their homes at the same time. Nursing homes are trying to foreclose on their homes, even though they're trying to transition back into their homes. So it's a very complicated system that nobody knows how to navigate. And unfortunately, our constituents in our districts are the ones that end up losing. And one was a very sad case where the person who was trying to get home and the daughter was trying to get her home, she died before she was able to get home. And it was our fault. It was. I mean, but not for the death, but the fact that it took this family almost 2 years to try and get this person home because the system kept failing and nobody was there to actually provide them with the information. So I think this is a very, very strong case for why we need to have a better system for people, because nobody knows who to call. They try to do it through case management, through Department of Social Services, but as we all know, that there are a long line for the case managers that are working in DSS, and they become a lost entity in what we're doing. So I think this is a good issue. I just would like to know, have you started keeping track on the people that are having struggles and trying to make transitions from one system to another? Are you all just having anecdotal where you have people come and tell you that they're struggling? Have you been working with any of the other agencies to try and fix this difficulty?
So let's start with the last piece first. We do work very closely with our sister human service agencies on issues around long-term care, around community care, to try to figure out how to help people navigate the system more efficiently and effectively. The tracking piece we haven't done yet because we haven't had a program. We haven't had a community ombudsman program within our agency until now. And the community ombudsman manager was just hired literally within the last week. So we now will have the second position proposed in the governor's budget. And that will be our mechanism to start tracking the types of calls and make sure that we are able to do just what you're suggesting is tracking that and figuring out, what do we need to build? What's the most effective strategy and use of our resources, and what resources already exist where we can help people navigate to those resources?
How do you work with Merit? How do you work with her in her position as the ombudsman?
Yep, Mairead Painter. So her position and her program sits within the Department of Aging and Disability Services. So she is a direct report to me.
Okay.
She and I have a great working relationship. She has a very interesting role because of the way the federal government and the federal ombudsman role is set up. She can independently present testimony. She can independently advocate with all of you for particular needs that she has. She can do that without going through the typical, instead of coming through the commissioner. She's able to do that on her own. But we work very closely with her to make sure that she's supported because it's a small program. So we make sure that she gets access to what she needs in terms of communication support, in terms of connections to other agencies. And so she and I work very closely together.
Does your agency do visits to nursing homes?
Her ombudsman they have to do visits to nursing homes. That's their primary job. And they do get out to nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, and residential care homes. They do an amazing job. They're a small but mighty team, and they've been doing great work. And as you know, they did great work all through the pandemic. So big shout out to them.
Yeah, they did an amazing job with the small staff that they had, and
Yeah.
we need a big staff. So thank you very much. Thank you for your answers, and I look forward to talking in the subcommittee.
Thank you. Senator Lesser, followed by Representative Dathan, followed by Representative Valinsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for Commissioner for being here. Just expounding on Representative Walker's question, do you have a full budget for the agency across different funding sources on and off? Because we only have the on budget, but we understand that the majority of your budget is not budgeted through us. So do you have a full budget for us?
We do. We have a full budget that we can present. Just to give you the highlights, we have, if we're just talking about our operating budget without including ARPA funds or public health workforce funds, our budget is 115.5 million, and about 75% of that comes from federal funds or other funds, and 25% of that is state funding. We can give you a full breakout by program.
If you could, that would be great.
Certainly.
And then my last question is the 114 vacant positions. Why are they vacant? Are they not approved by OPM to be filled? What's the story with that?
So we have about 40 that are fully approved in the system, and we are working to refill those. We did have a lot of retirements, as a lot of agencies did, but our agency is doing a great job rebuilding and being able to bring folks in. We had, I think we had over 40 retirements last year. We had 42 retirements last year. We were able to fill 51 positions, so more than the number of people that retired. The 114, we probably won't fill all of those because a lot of them are federally funded. We do have some restrictions. We have, for example, our disability determination services that I spoke about. We only get authority to hire from Social Security, and they only give us authority to hire once a year. So we might have a big bucket of positions that remain vacant until we get that hiring authority once a year from Social Security, and then they tell us to move forward. So there's a lot of different reasons. I don't believe we will fill all of the 114 at this point, but there are different reasons why there are so many. We have 40 right now that we are actively working on recruiting.
And I wasn't planning on adding a follow-up, but is that resulted in a significant backlog? Are the majority of those folks disability determinations?
We had vacancies across all of our programs, and our staff have been working very hard to make sure they are able to meet the needs of the folks that we serve. Interestingly, as we had some of the dips, we also had dips in the number of folks applying for benefits, the number of people coming to us for vocational rehabilitation services, because during the pandemic, people weren't actively seeking us for support. That number is starting to rebound now, and we're also rebounding staff. So I think we haven't had the backlogs. We've been able to sort of manage that. And as there's the upswing in need, there's also the upswing in staffing available to meet the need.
Okay, thank you. If, in addition to us providing the other information we requested, if you could also just provide information about your vacancies and their funding sources as well. Thank you.
Certainly.
Next up is Representative Dathan. She's online.
I'm here. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for coming today with your team. Really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed hearing about the long-term care ombudsman. It was something I really supported in the last budget cycle, and I'm glad to hear that's coming out. I am hopeful that we are monitoring that closely because I know in Mairead's team, they have a large number of cases outside of the sort of recommended amount of cases per ombudsman. So I'm looking forward to continuing to getting numbers on that. One question I had was the independent living centers. I know that these sort of places are great and save the state a lot of money. Why aren't we investing more in those?
The independent living centers provide a great range of services for individuals with disabilities. And they're structured in an incredibly valuable way. Our budget maintains the services that we had, the service level that we had, moving into the next biennial budget. So we are making those investments and we're able to continue the services at the level that we have them.
And how many folks are getting served by those programs?
We can get that information from
Okay, yeah, bring it to the work group if you would.
yes.
My
certainly.
second question is regarding the elderly nutrition and wanted to understand about how much money you're getting from the federal government for those programs.
Hold on one second. We
And you can bring it to the work group if you don't have to hand.
I'll give you a general answer and then we can provide some additional information. But we have, for elderly nutrition, the state budget has 3.4 million approximately, and the federal budget for that is 15.4 million. We also got some ARPA dollars specific to elderly nutrition.
And if you can share in the work group how many folks are served by those programs, that would be great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Belinsky, followed by Representative Nuccio.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You know what, it almost seems like Representative Dayton and I are thinking with the same portions of our brains today, because you know, she addressed a couple of the things that are very, very important to me. And I also want to just take my hat off to Representative Walker for the insight that she shared at the beginning of this conversation. Our ombudsman programs are absolutely the best way to support our you know, residents of nursing facilities, but also you know, to help transition in the way people are receiving their care, you know, in the current models. So I support the expansion of that program very much. And I also, you know, want to acknowledge the fact that they're working to empower our senior population, which, by the way, is the fastest growing segment of the of Connecticut's population right now. Commissioner, thank you so much for everything that you do with so few people and stretch resources. I have a question about the senior nutrition programs, and that involves the fact that, you know, have we completely and totally acknowledged the fact that, you know, aging in place is something you know, that has changed the entire dynamic. Combined with the pandemic, you know, we saw also that a lot of the congregate senior nutrition programs stopped, and then we became very reliant. Seniors, particularly those that you know, are on fixed incomes and low incomes, became very reliant on Meals on Wheels for not just nutrition, but also for welfare checks and things like that. So my concern is, you know, how the funding is flowing in those senior nutrition programs and making sure that we're accounting for the changes that are happening in that demographic. And then a specific question is, can you give us an accounting of just exactly the flow of money to senior nutrition programs, particularly the Meals on Wheels type programs, for this fiscal year, because I'm hearing right now from our nonprofits and community partners that there's significant chunks of funding that have not appropriated, even though we know they're in the budget. So as we move forward, I want to be sure that we're keeping them in a position where they can support our seniors and have everything working in a way where we're keeping them not only nourished but safe. So I'll leave that to you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Good morning.
Great.
Do you have a, so you let us know at the work group, Commissioner, on any of that?
We can certainly do that. Just generally, the funding does come to our agency and then it
I'm, like,
goes out to
stressing
the
it.
area agencies on aging. And then the area agencies on aging do a competitive procurement for elderly nutrition providers. And so that's the flow of money that goes out. And we're able to get that funding out. We have a couple of providers that are struggling right now, but they do have the flexibility. And we're going to reinforce this with the public health emergency ending and the unwinding of that. They have the flexibility up to a certain point based on the federal guidance to transfer money if they need to transfer it from the congregate approach to more of the home delivered meals. So we have reached out to them to let them know that they do have that flexibility and see what they need right now. And any of those details we can try to bring.
Yeah, I appreciate that and look forward to pursuing a couple more answers with it because, I know that in this part of the state, we have, we do have area agencies that are cutting back and their senior nutrition, particularly Meals on Wheels, is in the process of transitioning down to a 3-day-a-week program because they can't seem to shake loose the funding, and exactly why that's happening, I don't know, but it's something that I look forward to exploring with you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Nuccio.
Mine is really quick. I'm just want to make sure that the ask is fully formed and that what you're going to provide us is the total number of your employees and then by the funding type with also the opens for those areas also. So we can just kind of see the whole thing in there, what's federally funded and what's state funded.
Yes, we should be able to structure that for you and hopefully it will translate.
Painless also.
All set, Representative?
Yes.
Representative Exum.
Good morning. I'm going to be brief as well. I'm looking at the clock. I just have a question under the employment opportunities. And I just wanted to know roughly how many people are served in that particular area.
That's a great question. We are serving fewer people in that program because it is individuals who come to us who need long-term support. So we provide vocational rehabilitation services to a pretty broad number of individuals with disabilities. And the Employment Opportunities Program is just for those individuals who need long-term supports, who are not getting them or are not on the waiting list for the DDS waiver or for DEMIS. So if they're not eligible for another program, this is a state program that's available to them. So that number has decreased, but we do have a large number of people that we serve with a variety of disabilities through our vocational rehabilitation program.
If I could get a sense of that, it would be great. I'd also like to know, is this where the job coaches fall? Is that under in that category?
The Employment Opportunities would provide job coaching services. Yes.
Okay. And the last thing is around, is there a connection between 211 if families need to reach out and have a touch point as far as how to connect with services? Do you connect with 211?
Yeah, 211 is a tremendous resource and obviously they direct people to us, older adults, people with disabilities. We get a lot of calls. We field them. Sometimes they are for our agency, sometimes they're not. As you know, it's a complicated system to navigate, but we go through every year with 211 what they have for us in terms of programs, in terms of who are the folks that they should refer to us and for what reason. So we have a form that we populate with them every year. So they're able to usually refer the right folks to us. And sometimes they're just not really sure. And so they connect us, and we have great staff. So they're able to help people navigate, even if we're not the right place. They know of all the other systems in our state.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Representative Johnson and then Representative Dillon. I'm going to ask everybody if you could get right to it. And then if you can have the information sent to the subcommittee, that would be also very helpful.
That was my plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Representative Walker. I appreciate that very much. I just wanted to ask you to help us out with connecting the DVR work that you do with your workers' compensation people who are still in rehab and working perhaps through DVR, how that's funded, and whether the workers' compensation resources are applied to DVR in those circumstances. I guess that's my question. The other question that I have with respect to workers' compensation is the increase that's proposed because of the increase in wages. If we could take a look at the employment loss ratios and the medical loss ratios at that and how that's computed, I'd like to see that as well. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Dillon.
Good morning. Thank you. For the work group, this may overlap with some of the other questions, but with a number of pandemic programs expiring, for example, the Medicaid rollover, the enhanced SNAP, could you provide us with a list of like how many people that you serve that would be affected by those, and certainly food people have brought up and nutrition services, and anything, maybe the geographic distribution, so that we would have an idea of if there are any resources that your department could use to direct people through your ombudsman office.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we'll do our best on both of those questions. They're the workers' rehabilitation and voc rehab programs are distinct, separate funding sources. And so we can talk through what that looks like. And the folks we serve, it's a pretty broad population of folks with disabilities and older adults. So they can often be touched by a lot of different state services. So we'll do our best to try to give you a snapshot of that. We can definitely do the programs that are within our purview, and then maybe give you some insight of what we're hearing in terms of other impacts.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. And I think that's it. I just want to add a few more things for the work group. I'd like to know about the pensions for the federally funded positions. Are they on the state's pension, or is there another pension plan that they qualify for? And then the other is for the ombudsman's office. Is there anything that the state is paying for, or is most of that all being paid for through the feds? Bring it to the work group. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Up next, we have the Department of Social Services. Commissioner Andrea Barton Reeves. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well.
So we actually have a lot of questions for, sorry. She only had a half an hour. We have you down for an hour and a half.
Oh, okay.
So.
Actually, I am gonna go grab it.
Yeah.
This is her first time.
It is.
No mercy, right?
Oh.
Thank you for that.
So we appreciate your move most recently from the paid family side over to the Department of Social Services. And we know that you actually worked a lot with the Department of Social Services in your prior role before taking on either one of those at HARC. Did you not do a lot of work relative to DSS before this?
Yes, Senator. So the participants that we supported at HARC had quite a bit of interaction with the Department of Social Services, primarily through Medicaid, some SNAP. Where I sat in the organization, I didn't have as much intimate detail with the services that with the services that DSS provided to our participants. But I certainly heard a lot of the frustrations that families had expressed about getting access. And so we are continuing to work on those issues because I know that is still a primary concern. And, in the population of those with intellectual disability and others who have disabilities and medical needs that will not change, we understand the importance and actually the criticality of what we do at the Department of Social Services. So I think what we're all very committed to is to improving the level of service that we're offering.
So you were so successful relative to paid family. We're looking for the complete success on the DSS side so that we can fix a myriad of problems that we have all seen relative to the Medicaid rates. Some Medicaid rates have not changed in a couple of decades. Representative Walker and I continue to get the one-off changes that we call them.
Yeah.
Someone has finally said, hey, we've been applying to DSS for a number of years and we've not been able to get any change. We're going to go to Representative Walker and Senator Austin, and we're going to say, hey, listen, we have proof that we haven't had a change in 20 years. Can you help us out here? But we would really like to come up with a different method of doing this. Representative Walker and I have been asking for years, can you get us a list of the rates that haven't changed in 20 years or more than 10 years or more than 5 years, so that we can know that those are things that we should be actually looking at, because we don't know all the rates that you have. And we really think that that we should have a better methodology rather than meeting somebody in the cafeteria saying, hey, listen, my group has not had a change in a long time. And we look at it and they haven't had a change in a long time. And we address that one issue, but we know that we're not addressing all those issues because we don't have the access to all the rates that you have. So if in the work group, you could provide us with a number of, any rates that haven't been changed more than 20, any between the 10 and 20, and then those older than 5, so that we can see what do we have to do to make this a better funding stream, because we know that the people that contract you do need to make a living, and it doesn't do any good if we're not providing them with enough resources to cover their costs, because we want them to do breast examinations or cervical examinations or any one of the number of other things that you do. So if you could do that for us, that would be really helpful. So I'm going to go to my standard question relative to the number of positions that you have.
Yes.
So how many positions do you have in the agency? Of those, how many are filled?
Thank you for your question, Senator. If you don't mind, may I respond very briefly to the comment that you just made
Sure.
about
Yeah,
the
you can
rate setting?
respond. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So we agree with you that rate setting happens depending on advocacy and the person that you encounter in the halls of this building and others, and that it isn't really a successful, it isn't successful in the sense that it provides an objective, consistent manner in which rates should be set. So you'll also see in our budget that there is $1 million that has been set aside in order to enact a rate study to address this specific issue, so that it isn't really done by the level of advocacy that one organization or agency or industry may have over another, but that we're looking comprehensively and holistically about the way in which rates should be set, perhaps looking at the way that other states set rates, and then coming back with an approach that seems fair and objective and transparent, because that's really what the challenge is. So I just wanted to mention that we agree with you, and that's why we're asking for those resources in the governor's budget in order to conduct that study.
So while you're looking at all of those, one of the things that we have noticed is that there are historical rates for some places that are higher than other places that are doing exactly the same services. And then we contract with an out-of-state agency and they're getting paid what the historical rate, but those in-state operators are often not given the same consideration to have their rates increased to a level that is what that other original agency may do. So that's something that we are also noticing, is that the rates don't seem to have a method or reason to some of their levels, current levels, never mind trying to increase them, but their current levels are not what they should be. And it just seems that I used to hear from United Services all the time in Eastern Connecticut, and they'd say, I get a rate of X, but somebody in Hartford or New Haven is getting a rate 3 times, and I'm doing the exact same work.
Right.
So we just want to understand what that is, because we think there has to be a better way of managing what the rates are.
Yes.
Not only what they should be, but what they currently are too. So if that fits into that study that you're looking at, that'd be great.
All right, we will make sure that that occurs. So before I begin, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to say, as you noted in the beginning, that I'm very new. So I am learning as I go along. And I have, well, this wonderful team of people have agreed to accompany me here today. So I appreciate that. And so with me is Nick Vendetta, who is our chief financial officer. I think he calls himself fiscal officer. And then there is an array of individuals behind me as well who will be joining to answer questions that I'm just not able to answer. And I want to make sure that we provide you with accurate information. So I appreciate your indulgence at this early stage of my taking over this role. So, Senator, you had asked a question about openings, and actually Nick is going to respond to that for you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. Nick Venditto, Chief Financial Officer at DSS.
Could you speak a little louder, because we can, and
Sure.
repeat that, please?
Hopefully that's better. Yeah. Currently, we have,
You repeat your name.
Nick.
oh, sorry. Nick Venditto, Chief Financial Officer at DSS. We currently have an approved position count of 1,910. We currently have a filled count of 1,656. That does include 30 temporary worker retirees who are back with the agency. But throughout this fiscal year, those will be filled with permanent FTEs. And historically, our funding levels with normal attrition rates would fund us at a level that could carry us throughout the 26 pay periods at approximately 1,776 positions, which would put us probably a little over 1,800 given the normal attrition rate in a normal year. Obviously, our attrition rate has been a little bit higher in the last 18 months to 2 years, given the number of retirements and the changes in the job market. But that's where we currently stand.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to go to the residential care homes or residential care facilities. We were insured last year in the budget that there was going to be a change in the funding of residential care facilities, that there was going to be a request to Medicaid relative to the residential care facilities. We recognized that we had seen a number of residential care facilities closing around the state. And so, do you know why Medicaid is not providing any funding for residential care facilities?
I'm not sure why, and I don't know if that's actually that Medicaid isn't providing additional funding isn't providing additional funding for the facilities, but this budget reflects a rebasing of the money that we do have that's available. So where you see that the rates are being held steady for the residential care facilities as they currently exist, there are other parts of the governor's budget that you'll notice where because of the closing, and the closings are happening for a number of reasons, right? They're closing in part because of what we're seeing really is a staffing crisis that is happening across the board in every industry. And the cost of doing business continues to rise, and wages are also going up. And it's very difficult to attract people, as we know, to all of the caregiving industries. So in order to incentivize those remaining homes, we are rebasing their rates so that they are actually seeing a bit of an increase. And even though we're not necessarily increasing based on inflationary rates, the governor has instead held steady the regular inflationary increase and redirected some of those savings and those dollars into rebasing those rates so that they actually are a bit higher for the residential care facilities.
So and that's another one of the rates that we would like, that's something that we really need to look at, because residential care facilities across the state, but in particular in areas where we closed our state hospitals, do take care of a number of people that have chronic mental illness. And as you know, we've started using our prison system as a quasi psychiatric facility. They say that they handle more than Whiting and CVH combined of people with chronic mental illness. Residential care facilities properly funded could provide housing and supportive service, wraparound services for people rather than incarceration. And so that is something that we would really like to see done. You also provide funding for the Hospital for Special Care out of DSS.
Yes, we provide funding for the Hospital for Special Care and hospitals in the state. Actually, hospitals take up the most of the funding in that space. So yes, we do.
And my understanding is that that it is scheduled to see an ending of the vent rates for Hospital for Special Care, which would require them to close down some beds. And if they do, then the acute care hospitals would have to take on the care of those particular patients or clients. Do you have any way that we could consider continuing the rates on vents? Would that not make more sense?
Yes, it does, and we are. And so again, I sort of attribute this to my newness to the process, but this has been a critical conversation that we've been having at DSS. As a matter of fact, this morning, I did authorize our staff to move forward with a request for additional funding for vent beds for the hospitals for social care, because we realize how critical that need is. And so, yes, Senator, that will happen.
Well, thank you for that. Let me just, I don't see Representative Walker.
Good morning, and welcome.
Good morning, thank
And
you.
we promise we're not going to try and play stump the commissioner. we really, this is really about us getting information that we
Certainly.
need to try and figure out some of the things. I'm going to go first to some of the very obvious things that I would like to understand in the subcommittee. And that are the office hours for
Yes.
all of our DSS locations. How many have we closed? What have we done a reduction? And obviously the main concern that we have is the cliff that's about to happen in March, which is the redetermination and everything that you have,
That's right.
which is going to be a disaster for the people out there who don't know how to navigate the system. So if nothing else in this process of us communicating back and forth, we need to do something and send out something to all the facilities and to the clients that are utilizing our services. How do you do your redetermination?
Yes.
So that would be like one of my first things that really I'm concerned about. The other would be a conversation about our FQHCs.
Mhm.
How are we funding our FQHCs? We have, as Senator Austin pointed out, in a number of areas, we have multiple methods of reimbursement, payment, allotment that are going to different FQHCs. And it really is becoming a little bit more complex for us as legislators trying to figure out how to get people the services that they need. So that's another area that we would like to get some details on.
Yeah, thank you.
And then on your agency-based services under first choice, community first choice, I'm trying to understand how you're going to do the expansion. And you reduce funding of 12.4 million, but then you provide it in other areas. So if we could get a little bit more detail about that to understand, and some of the language is a little interesting because it says it related to expanding the first community choice to allow consumers to utilize agency-based services in addition to self-direction. That's great, but we need to be able to explain it in more detail for our constituents out there. So if we could, you want to answer that? Don't answer. 'Cause
Yes.
There are going to be a lot of questions.
Okay.
And so,
All right.
and I really, I'd like it to be thoughtful. So
Yes.
as we present these questions, we then work together in how do we manage this process. The other is in our TANF population, I believe there is we're we're not lapsing, we are underfunded in those areas. And in that, how did we conclude the population numbers that we were supposed to be serving under that? Are you seeing an increase? I guess you won't really know that until we start doing the redetermination. So we really want to look at what is our universe in that area, because there's going to be a lot of things that are going to change their availability for services. As you know, people increase their at least minimum wage and above, that's going to knock out a lot of people. And so I think we need to think about how are we going to make sure that we don't end up pushing people back into poverty. And so if that conversation could also be had with us. And I will wait and ask a few more, but I'll see if some of my colleagues ask. But I think our conversations are going to be very detailed. And so we'll bring snacks. But please, please give us the time that we need so that we can go through a lot of this, and you can learn and we can learn, because it's going to be a learning process. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Representative Nuccio, followed by Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome. I know you're new, so you're kind of getting like thrown right into the fire here, but I'm assuming since this organization is so big and they cover such a big amount of things, as we've talked about here, is we're kind of going to throw out questions, and hopefully somebody's keeping track and we can get all that when we go to the somebody in the back is nodding their head. So we can discuss it in the work session. There's a few things in here that I just want to hit on high level. First of all, what Senator Austin was saying, I live east coast of the river, and I can tell you every single provider that I've talked to, be it Rockville Hospital, Johnson Hospital, and all of that, I'm always hearing about Medicaid rates once you get over the river and how they're significantly different. And when my providers have reached out for some kind of rationale, they never really get it. Like, they're never really told why they're rated so much lower than areas west side of the river or more south. So I think that's a really big piece, is this $1 million. I'm excited about this because we hear a lot about the Medicaid rates, and I know I'm on insurance, so I constantly hear from providers there too about Medicare reimburses at this, Medicaid reimburses at that, et cetera. So I'm excited for what you're going to do with that $1 million to really do a solid review to see what our Medicaid rates would be. So I just want to make sure that we definitely are looking at the regionalization of these rates, because as I have told many people that I've talked to, a mental health crisis in Vernon does not look any different than a mental health crisis in Torrington. And the amount of services that are required for those people are not any different. So we need to kind of look at standardization of these rates and make sure that we're reimbursing people correctly. The next thing that I wanted to touch on is in the budget here, we have $2 million for access to abortion and contraceptives for non-residents. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because while I'm a pro-choice person, I'm not sure that the state of Connecticut residents should be paying for people outside of the state of Connecticut.
Understood. Well, the governor also, as you know, is don't know if I want to use the word pro-choice, but is very much in support of women's choice. And so that's what this $2 million represents. With the restrictions around federal abortion dollars, those cannot be used, they can only be used under very specific circumstances. And under some of those circumstances, you are required under the Hyde Amendment to question women when they come for an abortion as to essentially what the circumstances are of their pregnancy, which could include rape or incest. The governor feels very strongly that asking women these questions further traumatizes them and really causes women who are already making a very difficult decision to even be further traumatized by having those questions. By using state dollars only, we remove ourselves from the restrictions of the Hyde Amendment, and that allows us to provide that access to reproductive services without having to ask women these questions that may have already arisen from a circumstance in which the circumstances under which they became pregnant. So that is essentially what that $2 million would be paying for.
So I understand that, right? I understand the Hyde Amendment and removing that as a part of what we're asking here in the state of Connecticut, but this is specifically for residents outside the state of Connecticut.
Yes.
So that's my concern here, is that the state of Connecticut taxpayers are going to be paying for abortions and contraceptives for people who do not live in the state of Connecticut.
Right. No, I understand. But the governor feels very strongly that for those states that have outright banned abortion or have made it so restrictive that it is essentially a ban, that the state has, I wouldn't know if I describe it, but the state should be providing some access to those services as part of a woman's reproductive rights. So that is the decision that the governor has made, and that is supported in our budget, that women who do come into the state, again, would not be subjected to the questioning under the Hyde Amendment, but would be able to exercise their right to have an abortion in this state.
Okay, I think there's definitely more conversations to be had there. I
Yes.
absolutely agree on the Hyde Amendment. I don't necessarily agree that we should be paying for people outside of the state of Connecticut. And I understand the circumstances that they're in, but I don't know that that's the state of Connecticut's responsibility to pick up the cost of that reproductive care. The next question that I had, something that I'm very passionate about, is the benefit cliff. Benefit cliff, I think, is a built-in mechanism to keep people in poverty, and a built-in mechanism so especially single moms and people like that, they do not have the opportunity to succeed. So I have talked to OPM about my passion about that, and the idea that we should have a bridge and not a cliff, and we should have a sliding scale for, as people earn more money, how we adjust that to remove benefits as they gain benefits, so we can actually push more women and people into prosperity and stability, rather than relying on state services. So I was wondering if you could please give us some background on the double the asset limit under the TFA and the SAGA, and also increase the earned income disregard for the temporary family assistance. I believe, while well-intended, all this does is push the cliff out a little bit further, and it does not account for the raise in minimum wage and how we get more families off state assistance and more self-sustainable.
Right, I understand. And I may ask some of my colleagues to join me so I can answer your questions more specifically, but Representative, you were absolutely right about the cliff. And we've had the cliff for quite some time in the state and have not moved that number also for quite a bit of time. But there was a recognition in DSS, and I think also in the governor's office, that the cliff needed to, that the restrictions needed to move, right? And that the amount of money that a family, a single person, a 2-person family, a 5-person family could earn needed really to be increased before there was this impact, for the very reasons that you just identified, so that a person is not always in a cycle of poverty. There are just financial limitations around how much that cliff can be, how much that amount can be raised. And I'm actually going to ask Peter, are you the right person? Yes. Peter Hadler to come up and give you some more specifics, but we tried, at least in this budget, to start to work towards this issue of reducing that cliff. And truly, there, as you mentioned, there may be more work to do, but this, I think, gives a substantial increase to the amount of money that families can earn without losing a significant number of their amount of their benefits. And the time period is then longer. So at least now we can start to have families say, if you earn X amount of dollars in month 1 or month 2, it does not have this immediate adverse impact on your ability to go back to school, to look for a better paying job, because this balance that families are always making between how much I make in order to create a better quality of life for my family and losing my benefits has really been a losing one for many families. So this really is the first step in trying to reverse that trend.
So
Peter?
before we go on,
Yes.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think we're almost, we're dancing around the same fire, but it's different, right? So just pushing out, like making the amount that they can earn higher, but not accounting for a bridge, right? Instead of a cliff, all we've done is taken the cliff and pushed it out, which honestly, I don't know why the people here didn't realize that that was automatically going to happen with the raise of minimum wage, right? And we see that. I have nonprofits call me all the time about women who used to work 20 hours who now have to work 11 because they'll lose their benefits. We are incenting the wrong behavior. Instead of making it available so that woman can work 30 hours and slowly adjust what she's receiving for benefits, instead of having a cliff that says once you reach, I'm a prime example of this. I'm going to get all personal here. When I had my first child, I worked someplace. My husband was going to school. and I made $19,500 a year. And I called to see if there was any kind of assistance that I could get. I'm also a welfare child. My mother lived this like my entire life. I was actually told by the state of Connecticut to quit my job and go on welfare because I made $50 over the benefit cliff.
Right.
$50. They told me to quit my job and go on welfare, which is asinine to me, right? Especially growing up that way and seeing how my mother lived and worked and hated it and wanted to work and couldn't work because if she worked, she lost her benefits, right?
Right.
That is the system that we have in place here. And when we are just pushing the benefit cliff out, we're not adjusting for that. Whereas I want to understand what we're doing here and how that pushes the cliff out, what that limit is, and then how we start having the conversation of, instead of having that cliff, what does it cost for us to say, as you work 30 hours, your SNAP benefits are reduced by $25, like that kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
I think this is a bigger conversation than we can have here. So maybe we just focus right now on what do these two things do? And then in the work group, we can dig into it
Sure.
deeper.
Sure.
I'm just concerned that we're just kicking a can.
Yeah, I completely understand. And I think if I'm hearing you correctly, we want a more graduated approach over a longer period of time, right?
Correct.
That allows families to have actually more time because it's more difficult to say to a family, you have 4 months before your change in your working status will move you either to a lower level of benefit or off the benefit at all. So the questions we should be asking is that a sufficient amount of time? Should there be a graduated means on through which you move to get to a point where you are more, let's say, financially secure and more self-sufficient? And does this necessarily get us there? So no, Representative, this is a start. This does not get us there. But the goal is to get us there. And this is the place to start because it is a much better thing that has been happening. So it is a recognition that yes, we can do better. We need to move to that next step. This is the next step that we can move in the governor's budget. He also recognizes that we need to make a move, that we cannot be where we were. But is it the ultimate solution that we're going to? We would say it is a very good start and to continue to work with us through other sessions so that we can get where it is that we really want to go, because we absolutely recognize what you're saying as well. And to the Senator Austin's point, when I was working at HARC, I also worked with many, many mothers who were making the same decisions that you're. So I understand this. I really do. And I think that we're just starting with this legislation to see where we can actually get to the point that you're describing. So I apologize, Peter. Go ahead.
Very well stated. Hi, I'm Peter Hadler. I'm the Director of Program Oversight and Grant Administration at DSS and the state's TANF Administrator. I think your questions and your observations are spot on. I think that what's been proposed in the governor's budget, as the Commissioner was just saying, is a really good step in the right direction. This would actually put us, I think, in the forefront of states for how we are addressing this particular issue within the cash assistance program funded under the TANF block grant. So the concept here is, well, right now a person can be enrolled on TFA and earn up to 100% of the federal poverty level, at which point if they exceed that amount with earned income, then they drop off the program immediately. This both raises the threshold about the amount of money that a person can earn and still stay on the program up to, at a starting point, 170% of the federal poverty level. And that's roughly equivalent to a full-time minimum wage job for a family of 2, which is a typical household size for TFA. You then stay on for 6 months at that higher level. And additionally, if you continue to earn money, you continue to move up through a trajectory of a career path, you could move up to 230% of FPL and still have that 6-month period. So this really is a graduating of the cliff in a way, right? It is extending for 6 months where there was previously no months of continuation. And it's also a substantially higher amount of money that a person can retain and manage to keep benefits. There's a 20% proposed reduction if you go above 170% up to 230%. So it sort of graduates the benefit and sort of in the manner that you were describing. And so I think that this is definitely a very good first step. It would be wonderful to be able to implement it and see how it is able to help be a springboard for those families to get onto sustainable career paths. That is really ultimately the goal of the TFA program. So I think that this is a very good proposal. In many ways, it is addressing a cliff that has not been addressed necessarily by other states. There have been states that have increased the earned income disregard up to, I think, 150% or 200% of federal poverty, but this is a 2-stage one with a graduated benefit reduction. So the idea is to acclimate a person to having more earned income from their job, keeping that base TFA funding to be able to support their family while they take that path, but it does eventually end. It is, it is still ultimately a loss of benefits when you earn off the program.
So that's for both of these, for the TFA and SAGA, and then there's the or is that just for that one piece and then the earned income is something separate?
That's the earned income disregard. So the other two pieces of the, another piece of the puzzle is the TFA asset limit.
Yeah.
So a person has to have less than $3,000 in assets in order to qualify for the program and has to maintain that asset level as they stay on the program. So to allow people to retain more money if they're able to earn money through the program, stay on with their earned income, maybe save some more funds because we recognize that that limit is very low. This will both help more people get in the door in the first place and stay on for longer while they're on the program, while being able to accrue a small amount of savings to be able to address emergencies and other types of things that they will need to be able to address in the day-to-day life. The SAGA asset increase is doubling from 250 to 500 proposal. The reason behind this SAGA is really our program of last resort in the state. It is for people who have no other programs that they can use to sustain themselves. And so it has historically been the lowest income and asset threshold program in the entire state. But we have been making some changes. We've making some improvements to slowly increasing the SAGA benefit. And we've run into this little bit of a conundrum where the SAGA benefit itself is getting close to the SAGA asset limit. And so in order to have people be able to, not run into the situation where if they get their, $233 benefit in a month, if some of it's left over going to the next month where their next benefit is issued and all of a sudden they have assets that are exceeding the limit, it's sort of, trying to address that situation is why the SAGA asset increase has been recommended.
Okay, so just to clarify then, on the income disregard, it says in here, it's up to 230%. Is it 6 months for 100 to 170 and then 6 months from 170 to 230? Or is it 6 months in total from 100 to 230?
I have to go back and double check that.
I'd
So
prefer
we
the,
will,
I'd prefer the 6 months to 170 and the 6 months again
Yeah.
until 230, but I don't know that that's in here, but I just gotta put that out into the ether. All right, so if you can just kind of,
Yeah.
I would really like to understand more in detail, all of the stuff behind that. So I appreciate that. And I think, Madam Chair, I may have more questions later, but that might be it for now.
Thank you. Up next is Representative Gilchrist, followed by Representative Dathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Commissioner and team.
Good morning.
To follow up on Senator Austin's earlier question about residential homes, just wondering, you don't have to answer today, but as we continue on, just trying to better understand, is there a plan to move forward with Medicaid coverage? And is that at all tied to the capital funding for residential? Is this in preparation for them to be able to get Medicaid, or is that separate? And then if the plan is still to move forward, what is the timing there?
Okay.
So do you want to follow up and
I will follow up.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
thank you. My next question has to do with the acuity-based nursing homes. Included in this budget proposal, are there any incentive-based payments included in that total amount?
There are, let me ask Nicole to come up because we consider, yes. Nicole, will you come? Okay. Actually, two people that would like to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
And do you mind if I step away just from, I just have to grab a tissue, do you
Yeah.
mind? Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nicole Godwin. I'm the fiscal manager. Yes. Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry. There you go. Good morning. My name is Nicole Godwin. I'm the fiscal manager of reimbursement and certificate of need with the state Medicaid program, DSS. So Representative, the question regarding acuity reimbursement, you were asking if there were add-ons.
Yeah, I'm asking, is what's currently there, does that include the incentive-based payments? Will there be incentive-based payments? And is that included in that?
No, I don't believe, no, there's not incentive-based payments. The acuity, that line item is, you may recall the last session, we are phasing in the acuity reimbursement system over a 3-year period. There were guardrails placed on the system that allowed the state to step into it. that stepping into the system also gives predictability to the nursing homes, so they can see their rates slowly transition into the full acuity system. And by year 3, the guardrails will be removed and the system will be fully up and running. So I believe that line item is part of that phase in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a plan, though, to use incentive-based payments? And so is the anticipation that there'd be savings from the phase-in that then would be used to pay for those incentive-based payments, or would that be coming after the 3-year phase-in?
So by incentive, we are looking at a quality program, if that's what you're referencing by incentive. So we are looking at implementing a quality program into the acuity system. There's been, to my understanding, there's been no money allocated within the budget towards the quality program, but we are examining what a quality program would look like to incentivize improved quality and care for the residents of the nursing home. But there's no, at this point, no line item for that.
Thank you. And then my final for today is with regards to the, for this round, with regards to the quality assurance efforts that's outlined here, are there positions to help with redetermination? And if not, what is this speaking to, the quality assurance efforts?
Yeah, the quality assurance efforts are separate from the redetermination efforts. So the quality assurance is that is primarily in what most people commonly known as our audit unit. So that's the unit where I think most commonly known, where we go out to agencies and other entities that receive Medicaid funding, conduct an audit to make sure that the Medicaid dollars are being used for purposes that are defined by Medicaid, and that there's proper documentation and the like. And I think maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer than that, number of not-for-profits who were receiving Medicaid dollars through either their block grant, through their agency, were then also brought into that fold in conducting the Medicaid audit, and where the Medicaid audits were being conducted, and then there were reimbursements sought, where there was how can I say this, sort of where they were found that the payments that were made for Medicaid, really maybe there wasn't appropriate documentation, or there were other reasons to recoup that money. So that's what that unit does. So the idea of that unit is to continue to do that work, so that we can make sure that the Medicaid dollars are being spent as intended, and that documentation is properly maintained, and so that we can make those agencies, we can hold those agencies accountable in the ways that we have been. There are a lot of agencies in the state that receive Medicaid funding, so this is to help make that unit more robust and to continue a lot of the work that they're already doing.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Dathan, followed by Representative Foncello, followed by Senator Lesser.
Great, thank you, Madam.
For all of you who are saying you haven't called on me yet, I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for coming today with your team. It's really appreciated. We've talked a little bit about the study, but one of the things that I have concerns about is the study doesn't seem to be addressing availability of Medicaid providers, particularly in mental health services. You know, I know that was supposed to be part of last year's 5001. And, you know, we're hearing throughout the state, and I know some of the other representatives have talked about in their areas, the lack of providers. And I'm hoping that as part of this study, we address that because, you know, it's great that we provide these services and we say that we're going to reimburse them. But if there's no providers who are willing to work within those rates, it doesn't do much good.
Yes, thank you for your question. And yes, the study is intended to also to look at all of the industries and all of the service providers, so that we can have a comprehensive approach as to how rates are set. We do understand that there are providers who have not seen an increase for quite some time, or believe that the reimbursement that they're receiving under Medicaid is inadequate for the number of patients that they need to see and the complexity of their needs. So yes, that rate study is intended to address that issue as well.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to echo my first question was actually about the acuity base, which is what Representative Gilchrist. So I'm going to use another question on the people that were kicked out. There was recently a court ruling that under the Trump administration, a number of people were kicked off Medicaid. And there's been a recent ruling that they will be coming back on, but we will have to have retroactive payments because this was done illegally. Do we know how many people this affects in Connecticut? I've heard in the multiple thousands, tens of thousands, and just want to know if anywhere in the governor's budget has this been included?
It is not included in this specific budget, and that ruling was very recent, so it would not have been decided in time to have included in the budget. But I'm going to ask my Medicaid Director, Guy Woolston, to come up and answer that question with more specificity for you. Okay, no, it's Peter. All right.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for that question. This is something that we are very much still exploring. We only recently received CMS guidance about how to implement the ruling from the court. The court case was directed at CMS. It wasn't directed at the states. So we are looking for CMS guidance on how to implement the change in policy. Right. We do recognize that there are, I would estimate in the thousands. I don't know. We don't have an exact number yet because we're still evaluating the number of people who fell under this provision. Just a little bit of context behind that. In the event that a person had multiple types of Medicaid coverage or was eligible for another type of Medicaid coverage, they could be transitioned from most often a Husky C coverage group to a Medicare savings program if they no longer qualified for Husky C or had not taken action to maintain their Husky C eligibility. So these people that transitioned to solely the Medicare savings program and had a loss of some sort of Husky C coverage or other Medicaid coverage during the period is the target that we're looking to identify and looking to follow CMS guidance to reinstate them to coverage. And so that's the plan. We're working on it. It's still very fresh and we're still digesting the guidance that we've received to date from CMS.
Great. If you can share with the working group any sort of estimates that you have on this. I mean, the news report I read, I think it said 11,000. So that's why I had a little bit more concern that we might have a larger liability there. So if you can share that, what you have, at least with the working group, so we can think about that accordingly. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Up next is Representative Foncello, followed by Senator Lester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to yield my time since the question I was going to ask was asked and answered already.
Yeah.
Can I reveal it?
Yeah.
Save you a couple of minutes.
Okay, you're all set then?
Yeah, I'm all set.
All right,
Thank you.
Senator Lester, you're up. Thank
Oh,
the
my
gentleman.
goodness, Madam Chair. I thought I had a couple minutes to get my thoughts in order. No, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. It's good to see you. Just building on the question I think Representative Dathan asked, my understanding is that for big chunks of the Medicaid program, rates are tied to, I think, what, 54% of 2007 Medicare rates. Does that sound accurate?
That does sound accurate.
Okay. So just with regard to the Medicaid unwinding, I understand you've got a $12 million increase in OE that's largely attributable to that. I just was wondering if you could speak to the fiscal impact of the unwinding on DSS and the plans to address unwinding through passive redetermination, auto enrollment. I know there's a governor's bill specific to that. If you could speak to that.
Yes, I can, but it turns out that Peter is actually the better person to speak to that. But certainly the idea generally is that we will do as much of the work passively as we possibly can so that we can not only give people an opportunity to not have to panic and call and worry about what's going to happen with their services, but we can use data that we can get from federal sources in order to determine whether or not a person remains eligible for Medicaid and just do that renewal passively. For those that we are not able to do that for, they will have to actually engage in a more active and interactive redetermination, but I'll ask Peter to speak more specifically to that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And You're absolutely correct. I think that we have already done some big work in preparation for the unwinding, talked about the passive renewal process and ensuring that, the maximum number of people that we can verify independently with data that we're able to access and not have to go through a manual process is one of the key functions of the way that we're addressing this unwinding volume. So we do anticipate that the volume of people who will be going through a renewal process is not dramatically higher than a typical month, or a very busy month, I should say, typical, like aligned to an open enrollment month. We work in ebbs and flows across time. As far as the funding for some of the work that we are doing, some of the system work has already been accomplished. Some of it is already built in. I'm going to defer to Nick and see if he's got more he can elaborate on for that. We also are in the process of requesting additional federal funding to help support unwinding. We're looking to see if we can draw down the maximum amount of federal dollars to be able to support outreach, staffing, and system work related to the unwinding. So that is under development, and hopefully that's something you might not be seeing in these documents, is the additional federal funding that we're looking to receive to be able to support the unwinding. And I'm going to see if I'm still answering your question, or if
Well, and I hope you'll commit to work with us on issues like around auto enrollment with Access Health. And I know there's $10 million the governor's proposed for ARPA funding for the first 2 months premiums, and we'll want to work with you to figure out how to best use that funding if it's available. Can I just ask an unrelated question? So we've heard a lot from nonprofit providers about wage compression and other issues regarding their ability to fulfill their missions in a difficult economic environment. I don't see a ton of new money in the governor's budget directly related to that. I know that there have been questions about COLAs and other increases, and I didn't know if the department had any particular thoughts about how to address the needs of that community.
We agree with you, Senator, that there is wage compression. I have personal experience with the wage compression, so I certainly understand it. The governor's budget does meet the obligation of the COLAs that were agreed to very much. I know that was part of Senator Austin's advocacy several years ago. So it does include that. It does not include any other particular increases to wages right now. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't continue to work with the legislature to have those discussions. But as it stands right now, the governor's budget does include the obligation to meet those COLAs.
What would it take to get the department to reopen on Wednesdays?
That's an excellent question. What it would take for the department? Well, I will be honest with you and say that I'm still determining that. But I can tell you that on from my preliminary determination, it would take us being able to open, to fill at the very least the almost 175 openings that we have for people who need to work in our benefit centers. That would be the first thing. We get this question so often, as you might imagine. The challenge that we have is that without having the full complement of staffing that we need, and I also, if respectfully, would like to sort of reframe the idea of closing, because the office is very much open, and I've been there on Wednesdays and it's very much open. There are people there and they are working. The idea is to try to stem the number of phone calls and people who are walking in so that processing can happen, because it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that as we fall behind in our processing, more people call because they want to know what's happening with their applications. And then when we can't keep up with their applications, then more people call. And this is the volume of work that we're dealing with now. And then we are down a significant number of people. So the first thing that needs to happen is those positions need to be filled. And we are working diligently to get those positions filled. They are constantly posted. We are interviewing people. We did bring in a pretty large complement of people late fall, and many of them were actually promoted and they moved on to other opportunities where they could work 100% remotely, which is not something that we're offering at the Department of Social Services. So that is really one of the primary criteria it would take for us to, I would say, resume the levels of service and access to the offices that we have on other days of the week.
And my last question before I have the microphone pulled away from me, with huge supporter of the Covered Connecticut program. I think it's wonderful, but I understand that there's currently a surplus in the program, and then also the governor's budget anticipates some additional funding being allocated to it to meet projected increased demand. Could you just make sure, give us an updated, at some point, make sure the committee has updated information about where things stand today with with Covered Connecticut, and I'm curious to see if that could be better spent in terms of increasing, amending the 1115 to potentially expand coverage to more
Yes,
people.
understood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lesser. I was readying my hook. Representative Johnson, followed by Representative Dillon.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your
Morning.
testimony. And I just want to say how pleased I am with some of the progress that's been made with the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. Seeing the changes in terms of trying to address the benefit cliff is really a great positive step forward, as well as the increase from 44% of poverty last year to 55% of poverty. Those things are all very, very good. But when we're talking about benefit cliffs, we also have to talk about time cliffs. And the time cliff for 21 months is really something that is, I think, a real detriment to the population that is in such need and must be able to continue either what it is trying to make way with work, trying to find out how much they have in terms of access to childcare, and then putting them in that 21-month time frame. Well, maybe put them in a situation where they'll just put the child wherever they can, just so that they can get someplace to work and support themselves. And that's not a good thing to do with the children. And so I think we're running into a problem here with respect to how we're going to address the huge numbers of spaces we need for women in these circumstances and their children that need childcare. And also we're running into situations where we're finding that the level of poverty they're living in creates a situation where they can't afford their home, or they might have to be in a situation where I have one in my district, for example, that leaves the children with family members and stays in the homeless shelter because there's not enough room for her to be in the home with the family member. So these are things that we're running into with respect to the Department of Children and Families, because we're creating huge poverty unnecessarily. And we're also creating a situation in my district anyway, where people are finding that they're being evicted. They may be in homeless shelters. We have the Holy Family Shelter as well. I have 3 homeless shelters in my district. And they are in a situation where, the children are now homeless and they suffer. There have been a lot of studies that address this sort of thing that show that children that find themselves in homeless shelters in these circumstances suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which creates learning problems for them in the school system. And so for those reasons, I'm hoping that we can work together to try and change the 21-month rule and see what your take is on that particular issue.
Yes, so thank you for your question. And we work closely with the Office of Early Childhood, and Commissioner Bai is very, very conscious of the lack of affordable childcare options for families, and she's done quite a bit of work in that space. So I think what I will do is I will share the concerns that you've raised today to see how we can continue to work, because you're right, all of the social services and that safety net that we need isn't just with one department, right? It's with a number of departments, and that's why having this network across state agencies is really very critical. And so in listening to your point, it sounds very similar to the ones that were made by Representative Nuccio. And it's true. We do need to find a way to make that time period longer, to make it more realistic for families to be able to have an opportunity to move themselves from one socioeconomic status to another. Again, as I'd mentioned before, I think in this governor's budget, this is a very good, very strong first step forward. And we will then be able to bring this back and have a conversation, obviously, with our team and with other state agencies to see if there are other ways that we can support families if we can't change the time frame now, which doesn't seem like it's something that we can do. We have the 21 months, so we're working with what we have. But are there other ways that we can support families so that they can actually see some acceleration in other areas? And that's why I think it would be important to talk to Commissioner Bai, because if you can get good quality, affordable childcare, maybe you can get that better paying job a bit sooner, and then you can be within that 21-month period. So there are some things I think we can explore that we can work on.
So what would it take to remove the 21-month rule and go with a federal allowance of 60 months?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I will find that out.
That would be
Yes.
great. And
All
I
right.
appreciate that so much.
Absolutely.
And then following up, another question is with respect to Medicaid coverage for peer support as recovery coaches. Is there an option that we'll be looking at and how to do that? Or are we doing that at this point in time? How are we going to address the people who are in recovery and maybe with peer support?
I don't have an answer to that question either, Representative. I'm sorry, and I'm not as familiar with that program that you've mentioned. May I get an answer for you?
That'd be great.
Okay.
And also we've been talking in the medical
That's
assistance.
your
oversight
second
council.
question. Are you
Oh,
going on to
sorry.
the third question,
Oh,
Representative?
okay.
I'm just
Okay, Madam
saying,
Chair, I'll wait.
thank you. Appreciate it. Representative Dillon, followed by Representative Exum.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good
Thank you very
morning.
much
Certainly.
for your testimony. I wonder for the work group, if it's possible for your department to pull together some information about the programs that you administer, sometimes in coordination with other departments, that affect birth outcomes and maternal and child health. And I'm not thinking particularly of what the funding level is, although that obviously would be implicated. What I'm thinking about is the participation rates and whether I know, for example, that the food voucher program, the produce program, which is, I realize, ag as well, but not their full responsibility, had a drop in participation among pregnant moms, more so than among seniors. I don't know why. So that there are other programs I could cite, but people have been talking today about the great unwinding. It sounds like a theological event in the history of Connecticut, but it's coming, and obviously that will matter. And SNAP, the supplemental SNAP. So even if we just look at nutrition support, I know in the past in subcommittee we have looked at a little bit at rates and whether that makes a difference in terms of birth outcomes, and that makes sense because that's what DSS does. But I'm thinking also of housing, mental health. What are we doing? Has there been a drop in participation in the programs that we already have? Well, child visits, prenatal visits, and what can we do to do a nudge? And I say that I'm not necessarily saying it's all the pandemic. It's astonishing to me looking at programs we've done over the years, how reluctant some people are to just fill out a form. And that's not just for this, it could be for scholarships, it could be, and I don't know whether it's a literacy issue or whatever, so that there are a number of issues playing into that I don't know. So I'm not claiming anything, but if you could bundle that together so we could look at it through the lens of what are we doing to support moms, and children after birth, to make sure that and there's a whole panoply of issues. And I know that is other departments in addition to yours, but that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Exum, followed by Representative Paris.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here and for the presentation and the opportunity to ask questions. I am new to human services and to the appropriation. So I just have some questions about the redetermination piece. And I'd like to know how many people, and if you don't have this today, I'm certainly for the subcommittee would be fine. How many people are currently on Medicaid? I'd like to know that. And do you need to redetermine every person that is on Medicaid for that process, that unwinding process, is another question. And if so, and I know you're bringing people on, how long does it take to train the individuals who will need to do that redetermination?
Yes.
So if I could just have a little bit more clarity on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I can answer, I think, your last question now, then
Okay.
we certainly will bring you more information. Right now, the time frame for fully training an individual to provide the full array of services is 6 to 12 months. So it does take quite a bit of time to learn the complexity of all of the programs and have the person be facile enough in what they understand in order to be able to get on the phone or do an accurate level of eligibility determination. So one of the things that we're looking at is whether or not that time frame is one that we can adjust in phases so that it doesn't necessarily take as long. The preference is for a person to be able to call and to have the person who answers the phone or with whom they deal to be able to answer all of their questions. But the fact of the matter is that there is fully close to 1/3 of the people who live in this state who have some sort of benefit from DSS. So the idea is probably to be able to find a way to try to create some other kind of structure so that people can get their specific questions answered about their particular benefit or levels of benefit that they're getting. So that's very early, very preliminary, and that's what we're looking at. But it does take that bit of time. And I'm going to answer actually your second question, which I believe was,
Just every person.
I'm sorry, thank you. I was going to say, actually, you're right. No. Representative, no, every person does not need to. This is what we were referring to in terms of the passive renewal. So where we have the opportunity to access information from, let's say, taxes that are filed or other kinds of information a person may have provided to the state through other agencies. Through what we're permitted to do, obviously there are some restrictions around that. We gather that information and then we match that against what the eligibility standards are for the programs that they're applying for. And if we find that they're clearly eligible, then those renewals can be done passively. It's where we don't have that clarity or that access to accurate information because it can only be but so old. Because so if the last time a person, let's say, filed income taxes or updated their information was 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that's not new enough to meet the federal standards. And so those people would have to then come back. That's just one example, but it isn't everyone.
Every person.
No.
That makes a lot of sense. I was
Okay.
thinking if it takes a year or not
That's
just a
right.
year, how would you possibly do it in a time frame? So
Yeah.
that makes a lot more sense. And would most of them be passive?
A good number would be passive. It wouldn't be most. I think we're looking at somewhere in the 30 to 35% range. It might even be a little bit higher than that.
Okay.
It's higher. But Peter says it's higher.
It's higher
Yes.
than that. Okay.
How much higher is it, Peter?
No, thank you. I think just for a little bit of context, there are federal rules that require us to review everyone's eligibility once every 12 months. But as the commissioner was alluding to, that doesn't necessarily mean that each individual person needs to take action for us to determine that. And so that's the passive renewal process. It depends on the program that we're talking about. Some program rules are more complex and require additional types of information that we don't have as much of. For example, when we have programs that have assets involved in the renewal process, that requires an additional check against asset data sources, which aren't as comprehensive as income ones that we get from IRS or the Department of Labor or Social Security Administration. So the passive renewal rates for some of those programs that involve assets are not quite as high as some that are more concentrated on the income evaluation. We are hoping to be up around 70% passive renewal rates for the MAGI-based coverage groups, which is where the vast majority of Medicaid households are enrolled. MAGI being
thank you.
modified adjusted gross income.
Thank
Yep,
you.
sorry, I get to my
Modified
jargon
adjusted.
sometimes. So that would be your Husky A, B, and D groups, which is the vast majority of our Medicaid enrollees are in those programs where we're hoping to be able to get to a 70% passive renewal rate. For the Medicare Savings Program, the number is actually even higher. There's, they tend to have very static income based on Social Security is the most common scenario. And we have updated information from Social Security to be able to do that process for those households. So that can be up over 80% passive renewal rates for the Medicare Savings Program. For Husky C, we've been steadily improving, and we are probably in the high 40s to 50% passive renewal rate for Husky C.
That's very helpful. That helps to frame that. It makes it sound more achievable. Thank you so much for that information.
Thank you,
Madam
Representative.
Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Commissioner, how are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you.
Good to see you. I don't envy you because I'm looking at your scope of work and all of the various departments that you have to work with across the state. I, however, am trying to get a better understanding in terms of just how complex your job is and your role is. Over the last 2 years, the final budget provided some cost to us that saw some increases to nonprofits. Now, some of this part of this question is going to piggyback off of what Senator Lesser has once brought up and also Representative Johnson. In fiscal year 22, that was a 4% increase that was applied to the Medicaid behavioral health rates. And then also from that, we have not seen a sizable surplus in the Medicaid line item in the current year. Can you just explain to us why that's the case, that we've not seen that increase for the Medicaid line item this year?
I can try to explain that. So the Medicaid numbers as they currently exist, well, the way that the governor has, Nick is coming. Thank you, Nick. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, just to address the surplus question about the Medicaid numbers for SFY 23. We've put out a surplus, most recently, a surplus estimate of 200 million in the Medicaid account. Overall agency surplus, including the offsets where we have some accounts where we're, running a deficiency. We've been in the roughly 162 million range, but 200 million of that has been in Medicaid. So I just want to clarify that point.
I appreciate the clarification.
And I want to make a clarification because everybody that says that there's Medicaid lapses, the Medicaid lapses have been spent about 10 times over. So I just want everybody to know the Medicaid lapses are not designed to be spent on Medicaid. There are state dollars that were appropriated for Medicaid programs. So we got additional federal dollars in, and so we don't have to use as many state dollars. Those state dollars are not dedicated to Medicaid. We have had deficiencies and other things that we have used those Medicaid dollars. So to all my colleagues who are trying to spend that 200 million right now, I am letting you know it's already been spent. So please don't come to me asking for funds to spend of the 200 million that you think that is available. It is not available. It is not available. I can't say that as many times as I need to say that because every one of you has a $300 million program that you like, and we do not have 200 million left to spend. We've spent it on other things. Please continue with your statement. Sorry, Representative Paris.
It is okay, Madam Chair. It's fine.
I just wanted to make sure.
And I was not
really
encouraging anyone else to ask for any additional money. I feel like Senator Lesser right now.
Thank you, Senator. You made my last point for me. I was just going to clarify that. The reason for the surplus under Medicaid was the extension of the PHE, which is now going through, is going to step down, but is now going to go through 12/31 of 22 at a reduced rate. But through SFY 23, right, we'll be at 56.2% for the first 3 quarters of the year, and then down to 55% in that enhanced match in the last quarter of the year. And that's what's driving that additional surplus under Medicaid.
Thank you. And I asked complex question just because I think that there are a lot of moving parts, of course, with the state budget. And I don't think there are a lot of people at home or certainly in various sectors and industries across our state that understand just how complex it is, especially when there's so many good causes to help to appropriate funds towards. So I think that it's a learning question and answer, not only for myself, but for those at home and our constituents back in our districts. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Did I answer your question, Representative Harris?
I think that was good enough.
All right, thank you. Okay. Sure.
Sometimes people say I'm mean. I think I'm direct.
That's fine. That's fine.
Is there anybody that has a question that has not asked a question yet? Yep. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm getting anybody else. Representative Gilchrist for the second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Followed by Representative Johnson for the third and fourth time.
Thank you for a second time. We've spoken a little bit about 211, and so just wanted to ask some questions about that. It's my understanding that as a result of reduction in capacity, 211 has had to reduce the number of clients they can serve, and it's fallen by about 50% is what I'm being told. And that some hold times have increased by 110%. And so in conversations, I'm hearing that an additional 1.24 million would allow for an additional 13 contact specialists. Has DSS been able to identify that funding? Is that anywhere included in the governor's budget? Can we continue those conversations at the work group?
Yes, we can certainly continue the conversations in the work group. We have had those conversations with United Way, as I'd mentioned to you, Representative, and we do have some funding in our budget that's already part of the contracting that we do with United Way. So we are working diligently with them to secure that contract because it does need to be renewed. And I want to thank Guy and his team for all the work that they've done in order to secure that. And we really are out almost at the tail end of being able to do that. So we'll be able to come back with a specific number that it would take for them to have the levels of staff that they need in order to provide that service, which is really critical to us. Quite frankly, we can't do what we're doing in that space without them. So we're making every effort to make that work.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set, Representative?
Yes, I am.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you again for your great remarks, and you're looking into those issues. I just wanted to look at the idea that the State Assisted General Assistance Program that has no time limit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if you had a temporary assistance for needy families with a time limit, could they go on the State Assisted General Assistance?
I am not certain of that answer, but I can find out for
And
you.
if there are limitations, could you please
Okay.
say where they came from and how that
Yes,
works?
I can.
That would be great.
So I
Go
just
ahead.
want to make sure I understand your question, Representative. If you have a family that is, or an individual that's on TANF, can they move to Saga? And are there any restrictions to being able to do that?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other question that I have is the idea that back in 2000, I think it was, I think you had more staff at DSS than you have today. And I think you have twice as many clients. If you wanted to bring those figures out just to show the differences between what happened 20 years ago and where we are today, that would be most appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? Commissioner, great job on your
Oh,
first time in
I-
front. Wait a minute. I'm
we-
sorry.
Representative Dathan.
Representative Dathan has a question. I'm sorry. It's online. I should have.
Yeah, apologies. You thought you were ready for lunch, but one more question. Just wanted to kind of dig in on the reduction in the rate increases for intermediate care facilities for individuals with IDD. Can you please elaborate on that? And is it due to reduced number of people in those services, or because I understand the waiting list is still long, and I'm just kind of concerned that if we're reducing funding, we're going to reduce the number of available spaces for folks.
Nick, did you want to?
So I think you're referring to the adjustment to the rate increases for ICF. So what this is it's actually not a reduction to the current rate, but it doesn't allow for an inflationary increase over the next biennium to those rates. So right now, what we would do in the budget process is we would build in those inflationary increases, and then the budget adjust those to pull them out of the baseline. So not necessarily a decrease from the current rate that's paid today that's in effect, but holds them steady through the biennium.
Okay, so did all the providers receive these increases from last year's budget?
I believe in last year's budget over the biennium, the inflationary increases were included, so they would be in the current rate, the inflationary increases for 22 and 23. There would just be no additional inflationary increase in the budget for 24 and 25.
Okay, but the fact remains that there has been inflation. And so not making this increase is actually in effect a cut. Is that correct?
It holds the rate steady, correct? It would
Okay,
increase them over the current levels.
That's correct.
It wouldn't allow for those additional inflationary increases over the next biennium.
got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think I'm safe in saying we have finished asking you questions. I look forward to seeing you at the subcommittee or your staff at the subcommittee.
You will see all of
That-
us at this.
Thank you very much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. You are a very important agency to the fulfillment of a state budget. So that's why we have so many questions relative to your
Understood.
agency.
We
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
That concludes, Madam Administrator, I believe that concludes our appropriations hearings for the day.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Say it again.
Yes, ma'am, we are done.
Okay, so we're done for the day. What do we have tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have elementary and secondary education. Currently, we have 315 people registered to speak starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow.
So we have 316 people, 350 people,
15 so far.
301.5. So just so everybody's aware of that, we have 315 people starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow to speak at the public hearing. So that means that if you times that times 3, divide it by 60, that gives you how many hours we anticipate being here. Okay? Thank you, Madam Administrator.
You are welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
It's supposed to snow. We don't even have to worry about if it snows because we'll be here all night anyway.